My name is Ben Burgis. I'm the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, out now from Zero Books. I'm also one of 4 co-authors of Myth and Mayhem, a leftist critique of Jordan Peterson, which is out next month from Zero Books. That also has an introduction by Slavoj Žižek. What I want to talk about today, though, isn't Peterson or anything related to him, but Senator Elizabeth Warren. In particular, the decisions that Senator Elizabeth Warren has made since leaving the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. Of course, she had to drop out because she didn't win any states. She didn't even come in second in any states. She was third in her own state of Massachusetts. So her dropping out is no surprise, but given her stated policy preferences, her stated values, you would have expected that in the very press conference or Medium Post or whatever, when she dropped out, she would have endorsed her old friend and Senate colleague, Bernard Sanders. After all, Elizabeth Warren claims to be a big supporter of Medicare for All. Now, she didn't start talking about Medicare for All as early as Bernie Sanders did. There's a gap of some decades there. But for the last couple of years, she's presented herself as a pretty enthusiastic supporter. I think that obviously, as a Bernie supporter and a socialist, I had a lot of criticisms of Warren from the left while she was running. But I am going to assume, for the sake of argument, for the purposes of that video, that people like me were just wrong about that, right? That, in other words, when we doubted the sincerity of her commitment to Medicare for All, because of the way that she wasn't willing to embrace what we saw as a fairly easy argument, sure, if you're a middle-income taxpayer, your taxes would go up a little bit to pay for it, but your premium co-pays deductible would be completely abolished, and that would be a huge savings for anybody who wasn't rich. The fact that she wasn't willing to embrace this fairly simple argument worried a lot of us, that she was so allergic to that talk of, middle-class taxes, that right-wing talking point. And when she started talking about Medicare for All as a long-term goal and a public option as a short-term goal, then that really made a lot of us doubt whether she was ever really that committed to it. But again, I will assume for the sake of argument for this video that these concerns were unfounded, that these differences between Bernie and Warren about how to finance Medicare for All or when exactly to start fighting for it really were just tactical or perhaps even strategic differences within the pro-Medicare for All camp, that really she was just as committed to that as he was. They just had difference of opinion about, as David Feldman would put it, how to get there. All right. Well, making that assumption, the decision about who to endorse and whether to endorse, right, whether to endorse anybody at all, whether to wait until her endorsement would be meaningless because one of them hasn't locked up, or to endorse Biden or to endorse Sanders, seems like a super easy decision. Because look, Bernie Sanders lives, breathes, eats, and sleeps Medicare for All. Nobody doubts his commitment to that policy, whereas Joe Biden just said in a news interview that even if hypothetically both the House and the Senate passed Medicare for All, he would veto it as president because it's too expensive. That seems like a really easy choice if you have any commitment at all to ending the parasitical rent-seeking private insurance industry that is literally killing so many of us. And you can tell similar stories on issue after issue after issue. So why is it that instead of endorsing Bernie the second she got out of the race, Warren has instead gone on Rachel Maddow to talk about snake emojis, which in the context of Joe Biden being in danger of winning the nomination, or the senile husk of whatever's left of Joe Biden, which is still very loyal to the credit card companies and the private insurers, getting the nomination. This is like, while everybody's rushing for the lifeboats on the Titanic, tracking down the band to complain because you've got some notes about their performance. Talking about snake emojis? Really? So many Warren supporters seem to think that it's a wonderful statement of self-care, or maybe even feminism, that Elizabeth Warren isn't endorsing Bernie Sanders. People will say things like, I just love it that, both of these men are after her, and Elizabeth Warren is saying, no, I need some time for myself. That, people are saying, she doesn't owe these men anything. Or there's a related talking point that's floating around Warren world about how, Elizabeth Warren is so qualified, she's so amazing, she's so perfect that if she were a man, she would never be in this position anyway, because she wouldn't have had to drop out. Now, let's talk about these in reverse order. That last one, even if it were true, it would be a complete non sequitur. It would have nothing to do with the issue at hand. If Bernie Sanders was doing badly in the election because of anti-Semitism, but there was a decision he could make after dropping out that would help millions of people get health insurance, and there's a decision that he would make that would guarantee the opposite outcome, I don't think there's any doubt about what he would do or about what he should do. You can deplore the anti-Semitism, but still say that being in that position, there's a fairly clear moral obligation. And here's the other thing. It's not true. It's obviously not true. The fact that so many people are taking it seriously or pretending to take it seriously is one of the most tedious moments of performative wokeness that we've seen in the entire campaign. Of course, sexism is very real and horrifyingly pervasive, and of course, that makes it an overall disadvantage in life and society to be a woman. But there's a huge logical leap from that true premise to the obviously false conclusion that it's a big disadvantage in a Democratic primary in the 21st century to be a woman. No, it's not. It's an advantage. Let's be real about this. The small subset of the electorate that votes in Democratic primaries, the subset that's committed to the Democratic Party, has pretty progressive values about stuff like this. It likes breaking historic barriers. You'll notice this is the primary electorate that gave us Barack Obama. It's the primary electorate that nominated Hillary Clinton. And it's the primary electorate that had Kamala Harris ahead in all of the early polls until, through a series of own goals, she messed up, right? She couldn't pick a lane. She, kept going back and forth about how to present her campaign. It was not a well-run campaign. All the wins were at her back because it would have been so historic, but she didn't end up pulling it off. That's just obviously true. If we really try to imagine the male version of Elizabeth Warren, somebody exactly like Warren in every possible respect except for gender. So somebody who's the same age, with the same academic and legal background, the same political instincts, the same policy preferences, the same mode of presentation, but who is a man. I think if we're being real about this person, I'm kind of imagining him looking like the character Gil, the Bernie Sanders knockoff character in the HBO show Succession. This person would not I mean, look, forget about the silly versions of this argument that Elizabeth Warren would be winning if not for sexism, or that she would necessarily be doing better than every male candidate if not for sexism. Even dealing with the most stripped-down steelman version of the argument, that Elizabeth Warren would be doing at least slightly better than she is if not for sexism. Again, that's just not true. This Gill sort of character, male Elizabeth Warren, would have been a Martin O'Malley-sized forgettable footnote, if not a Jay Inslee-sized forgettable footnote. Because what would they have going for them? Gosh, he seems a lot like Bernie Sanders, but he's a sprightly 70 instead of 78, and he seems a lot more wishy-washy about just how social democratic he is. He seems to be kind of trying to split the difference between Bernie and the rest of the field. Sounds a lot like Martin O'Malley to me. But again, even if it were true, it would have nothing to do with anything. And if you seriously assert, Elizabeth Warren doesn't owe these men anything, as if the issue were what she owed Bernie Sanders as an individual, if you really think that way, then that's just such a disturbing window into an incredibly narcissistic PMC, professional middle managerial class worldview. Like, Elizabeth Warren is your favorite character on the presidential election TV show, but you can't detach yourself from this PMC framing of viewing the whole thing as the kind of technocratic job interview, right? Who's the most qualified candidate? Well, if this person's not going to get that job, they don't owe anything to, this other person who might get the promotion instead of them, as if that were what was at stake here and not millions of people who are disadvantaged by our system of mostly private, mostly employer-based healthcare, with all of the insecurity that brings even to the lives of middle-class people who have okay healthcare, but they could have the disruption of having to switch anytime they switch jobs, lose a job, their employer switches it, much less the millions of people without healthcare, much less when we start thinking about the Green New Deal, climate change, and foreign policy, where Sanders and Biden are really night and day. The billions of people who are impacted by this election. If you can't think about those billions of people and everything that's at stake in Sanders versus Biden, all you can think about is, which of these applicants for this managerial promotion you like and whether they owe anything to the other individuals, then, frankly, in the immortal words of Joe Biden, who was talking about millennials and student loan debt, I got no sympathy.
Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.